May your day be filled with profound peace and justice, and may the week ahead bring you just absolute clarity and purpose. Just a divine blessing over your week, wherever you're listening from today.
That's a really great way to start, especially considering what we're, getting into today.
Right, because that concept of justice is just incredibly fitting for our deep dive today. We're looking at an ancient society where justice meant something far more radical and honestly far less brutal than I think we've been led to believe.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we usually approach these ancient Near Eastern legal codes expecting to find, I don't know, these incredibly unforgiving, dusty environments.
No, like very primitive.
Exactly. The assumption is that justice back then was simply the strongest person in the village imposing their will, relying on purely punitive, retributive violence with really no room for nuance at all.
But today we're going to completely shatter that assumption. We're diving into excerpts from two comprehensive study Bibles, the Holman Study Bible and the NWA, the Nova Almeida Actualizada.
Both of which are just fantastic resources.
They really are. They provide this extensive, highly detailed commentary, specifically on Deuteronomy chapter 19. And our mission today is to figure out how ancient Israel structured a justice system that somehow balanced, profound mercy with incredibly strict boundaries.
Right. And what makes the commentary from the Holman and the NWA sources so valuable is how they differentiate the specific mechanics of this society. They don't just, offer a surface-level translation of ancient statutes.
Yeah, they really dig deep.
They do. They drill into the theological and historical why behind the laws.
We're talking about ancient sanctuary cities, the severe consequences of moving a literal rock in a field, and why the famous phrase, an eye for an eye, might actually mean the exact opposite of how we use it today.
It's going to blow some minds, I think.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get to the courtroom drama, we have to look at how the society handled a fatal accident in an era long before, forensics teams or organized state police.
Right, which is a wild thing to try and manage. Seriously. So the text outlines the creation of what they call cities of refuge. The law mandates setting aside 3 specific cities in the Promised Land.
And the NWA notes explicitly list them.
They do, yeah. Kadesh, Shechem, and Hebron. And the community was basically ordered to prepare and maintain the roads to these cities, keeping them accessible, and to divide the land evenly. And if their territory expanded, the text commands them to add 3 more cities.
Yeah, and the Holman study notes point out the sheer scale of this infrastructure.
Oh, it's massive.
It really is. Because adding those 3, plus 3 that were already established east of the Jordan River, that meant there could be a total of 9 sanctuary cities scattered across the territory.
Wow.
I mean, this was a massive logistical undertaking just to deal with unintentional manslaughter.
And the text gives this incredibly vivid scenario to explain why all this infrastructure was necessary.
The axe story. The axe story, yes. So 2 men go into the woods to chop down a tree. One man swings an axe. The iron axe head flies off the wooden handle, strikes his neighbor, and kills him.
Which is just
a purely horrific, unintentional accident.
Yeah.
But the survivor, he can't just go home and explain what happened.
No, absolutely not.
Because he has to flee to one of these designated cities to escape what the text calls the Avenger of Blood.
Right. And we have to remember, in a tribal society, the primary social fabric is family loyalty. So the Avenger of Blood was typically the closest male relative of the deceased.
Wow.
Yeah, it was their societal duty to avenge the death, to basically restore honor and balance to the family name. The immediate response to a fatality was not some dispassionate police investigation.
Like we'd expect today.
Exactly. It was a highly emotional, kinetic pursuit.
See, I want to challenge our modern framing of this. Because when we hear Avenger of Blood, we immediately picture like a rogue assassin from an action movie.
Oh, for sure. John Wick or something.
Exactly. And when we hear Sanctuary City, we think of a modern political loophole. But looking at these notes, it seems to function more like, is it an ancient witness protection program?
Sort of, yeah.
It almost reads like a legal escrow account for human life. Like it's a neutral holding zone where the accused person's life is just frozen until an objective judgment can be rendered. So how do they stop people from abusing the system to get away with actual murder?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the law brilliantly distinguishes between intent, so murder and accident, which is manslaughter.
Right.
It essentially introduces a pause button into the cycle of tribal violence. And the NWA notes tie this entire concept directly back to the 6th commandment, do not murder.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, the overarching goal of the sanctuary infrastructure was the preservation and protection of life, even the life of a person who made a fatal error. By forcing the avenger to stop at the city gates, the law guarantees the accused survives long enough to actually face a rigorous evaluation of their intent.
It forces the society to evaluate uh, mens rea,
Right.
the guilty mind.
Exactly. Did this person harbor prior hatred? Did they lay in wait?
Which is the entire foundation of distinguishing between first-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter in our own courts today.
It is, and that distinction is fiercely protected by the law's boundaries. The text is unambiguous about what happens if someone actually hates their neighbor, murders them in cold blood, and then tries to, exploit the city of refuge.
Oh, the exception clause.
Right. The elders of the murderer's own hometown are mandated to send for him, drag him out of the sanctuary, and hand him directly over to the Avenger of Blood.
Man. And the text commands the elders, quote, do not pity him.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly harsh to modern ears. If the ultimate goal is the preservation of life, why mandate such a ruthless extradition?
Well, the Holman notes clarify that this lack of pity is actually a profound respect for the sanctity of the innocent life that was taken.
Okay, how so?
So, vengeance for a homicide was permitted within that cultural framework, but God's law absolutely restricted it only to malicious, intentional murder.
Oh, I see.
By removing the intentional murder from the sanctuary, the community purges the pollution of innocent blood from the land. Harboring a true murderer would corrupt the very concept of the sanctuary, right?
Right, it would turn a mechanism of mercy into an instrument of injustice.
Exactly.
So, if the sanctuary cities show us how far the law went to protect biological life, the next layer of the system forces us to ask, what good is biological life if you are slowly, invisibly starved to death?
That's a great transition.
Which naturally brings us to the next section of Deuteronomy 19. It focuses on the protection of land.
Right.
The text issues this incredibly strict prohibition against moving a neighbor's boundary marker, or the landmark set by their ancestors.
We see a really deliberate shift here from the sanctity of human life to the sanctity of the means to sustain that life.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, where I struggle to reconcile the ancient mindset with our own.
How do you mean?
Well, to a modern listener, if my neighbor moves their fence post a few inches into my yard, or we have a property line dispute, that's a minor civil suit.
Sure.
I might call a city surveyor. I might be really annoyed. But the text treats moving a rock in a field with intense gravity. It places it immediately after laws concerning capital murder. Why on earth is this treated with such intense gravity?
Right. It seems disproportionate to us.
Exactly. Why elevate a property dispute to the level of lethal violence?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the NAA notes provide the crucial theological context we're totally missing when we look at this through a modern industrialized lens.
Okay.
In that agrarian society, land was not just real estate.
It wasn't an investment property.
No, not at all. It was not a financial asset to be bought and sold on a speculative market. The land was viewed as a direct divine inheritance given by God himself to that specific family.
So shifting the boundary marker isn't just stealing dirt.
No.
It's a cosmic offense. It's actively disrespecting the divine allocation of inheritance.
Exactly. It's a rebellion against God's provision. And practically speaking, it is a slow-motion destruction of a family's future. The Holman study notes highlight that moving a landmark was a stealthy, cowardly form of theft.
Because you do it at night.
Right. It lacks the overt aggression of an armed robbery. An individual sneaks out into the field at night and shifts the stone boundary marker over a foot or two.
Just a tiny bit.
But over several years, they are bleeding their neighbor's livelihood dry.
It's topographical slow-motion murder.
That is a great way to put it.
Because without the arable land, you are taking the crop yield that their children require to literally survive.
Exactly. And without a modern social safety net, losing your family's inherited land meant starvation or, being forced to sell yourselves into servitude.
Which is horrifying.
It is. Stealing land was effectively erasing a family's legacy and their physical existence over generations. That is why the text assigns it the exact same moral weight as striking someone down with an axe. It is an assault on their existence. It's just executed at a much slower pace.
To enforce stakes this high, though whether you're dealing with intentional murder, accidental manslaughter, or the stealthy erasure of a family's inheritance that requires a bulletproof judicial mechanism.
You need a good court system.
Right. Because if the penalties are this severe, What stops someone from weaponizing the law?
Right, to destroy their enemies.
Exactly. If I despise my neighbor, what stops me from simply accusing him of moving my boundary stone or accusing him of murder just to leverage the state to execute him?
Yeah, false accusations were a lethal threat in a system with such heavy penalties. So the final section of Deuteronomy 19 is dedicated entirely to the integrity of the witness stand.
Okay.
It establishes an inflexible baseline. A single witness is never, ever sufficient to convict someone of any crime or offense.
The text explicitly requires the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses to establish a matter. But the ancient legislators clearly understood that conspiracies happen, right? People collude. Multiple people can team up to frame an innocent person. So the text outlines a very specific investigative mechanism. If a malicious witness is suspected, both parties are required to stand, quote, before the Lord, before the priests, and before the judges who were serving in those days.
And that phrase, before the Lord, that indicates they likely had to present themselves at the central sanctuary or the tabernacle.
So it's a huge deal.
Oh, massive.
Yeah.
The religious and civil authorities merged to conduct a rigorous, careful investigation. The psychological intimidation here is just off the charts. You are not just lying to a local magistrate. You are committing perjury in the physical presence of the divine and the highest authorities of the entire nation.
And the punishment for that perjury is staggering.
It really is.
If the investigation proves the witness gave false testimony against their brother, the judges are commanded to do to the false witness exactly what they intended to do to the accused.
Yep.
If you colluded to get your neighbor fined, you pay the exact fine. If you lied to get your neighbor executed,
You are executed.
you are executed. And the text explicitly states the purpose is deterrence. Purge the evil from among you, so others will hear and be afraid and never again do such an evil thing.
The entire system hinges on the psychological weight of reciprocal consequence.
Wow.
The trap you meticulously set for your neighbor becomes the exact trap you fall into if your deception is exposed.
Which leads us directly into one of the most famous and honestly most controversial phrases in all of ancient literature. To justify this exact reciprocal punishment for perjury, the text quotes the lex talionis, the law of retaliation.
Right, here we go.
It commands, show no pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Now, today, an eye for an eye gets a terrible rap. We use that phrase to describe barbaric vengeance, right? The idea of a never-ending cycle of violence where, everyone ends up blind.
Yeah, we totally project our modern anxieties about vengeance onto an ancient legal principle that was actually designed to do the exact opposite.
So what does this all mean? How did it actually function?
Historically and legally, the lex talionis was a principle of strict proportionality. It was a thermodynamic limit on retaliation.
A maximum limit.
Yeah.
Because human nature dictates escalation.
Exactly.
Like, if you knock out my tooth, my instinct is to break your jaw. If you take my eye, my family will try to take your life. The law steps in and says, no. The punishment must perfectly fit the crime, and it cannot exceed it under any circumstances.
This raises an important question, though, and the Holman notes bring up a fascinating scholarly debate regarding how this was practically applied.
Okay, what's the debate?
There's significant discussion over whether eye for eye was ever meant to be applied through literal physical mutilation, or if it was universally understood as a principle of equivalent penalty.
Wait, really? But if we read equivalent penalty as financial compensation, like paying the monetary value of an eye or a hand, doesn't that just create a system where wealthy people can afford to blind their neighbors, while poor people cannot?
That's the immediate concern, right?
Does the Holman commentary address that disparity?
It does. It addresses it by focusing on the concept of exact equity. The Holman notes lean toward the interpretation that literal physical mutilation was rarely, if ever, carried out, and they base that on other biblical texts.
All right.
However, the financial compensation was not just some flat fee that a wealthy person could easily brush off. The principle demanded that the punishment exact the same proportional toll on the offender as the injury did on the victim.
Oh, I see.
And when you pair that with the perjury law, it meant that if you tried to falsely accuse someone to inflict a devastating penalty on them, you would face the exact equivalent devastation yourself.
Wow.
It created an environment where the truth was fiercely protected because the risk of lying was mathematically identical to the risk of the crime itself.
That is just brilliant. By establishing the cities of refuge, this system recognized the profound tragedy of human error and actively stopped emotional cycles of violence.
Right.
By protecting the boundary stones, it recognized that nonviolent economic theft can be just as deadly as a physical attack over a long enough timeline. And by implementing the strict requirement for multiple witnesses and the proportional punishment for perjury, it ensured the entire judicial apparatus couldn't just be manipulated by the powerful, the wealthy, or the vindictive.
It is a highly sophisticated jurisprudence. It profoundly respects human life, demands absolute empirical truth in the court, and legally restricts the destructive nature of human vengeance.
It really does.
It totally forces us to reconsider what we define as advanced justice.
It certainly does. Which leaves us with a thought I want you, the listener, to mull over as you go about your week. Just imagine the sheer psychological weight of that ancient perjury law operating in our world today.
Oh man, it would be chaotic.
Imagine how entirely different our modern legal, political, and social systems might look if anyone caught perjuring themselves. Anyone who lied to frame someone else or intentionally fabricated a narrative to destroy a reputation automatically, without exception, received the exact sentence or consequence they tried to inflict on their target.
Wow.
Would that fundamentally change the way we speak about one another? Would it change what we post, what we claim, and how we pursue justice today?
It would undoubtedly force a profound societal reckoning regarding the actual cost of our accusations.
We started today talking about how we often view ancient laws as brutal, jagged things from a primitive past. But looking at the incredibly complex, often muddy waters of our own modern justice system, perhaps there is something profoundly clean, profoundly merciful about a law that simply refuses to let a lie destroy an innocent life and demands that the punishment perfectly mirror the crime. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. God blesses all the listeners.